All right, I want you to picture a flawlessly green, post-scarcity solarpunk city. We're talking about a world where humanity has literally done it. We've actually solved all our physical problems. Poverty? Gone. Hunger? History. Environmental collapse and forced labor? Completely eradicated. By every conceivable metric, it is an absolute paradise. But, as we're going to dive into in this explainer, this perfectly engineered utopia has developed a really unexpected pathology.
And this sets up the central mystery of our journey today. It's a profound one. Can a paradise actually be so perfect that it becomes fatal? Like, what happens to the human mind when it no longer has to struggle just to survive? We're basically stepping into a philosophical whodunit here. And without giving away the incredible twists coming up, I can tell you right now, the answer completely upends everything we naturally assume about human happiness and fulfillment. To really grasp this, we have to ground ourselves in the stark contrast of this reality. This is a society that has successfully wiped out want, greed, and violence just by making sure everybody has everything they need. The old world, our current world, is entirely defined by scarcity and imposed suffering. But this new world is defined by total, frictionless comfort and absolute aesthetic beauty. There's practically zero motive for crime anymore because there's absolutely no deprivation left to drive anyone to desperate acts.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's a rainy 3:47 a.m. in Sector 11, Garden Block 44. Enter Detective Vera Vasquez. Now, a detective is a job that barely even needs to exist anymore in a society with no crime, right? But she gets this rare emergency call-out to a stunning, tiered vertical garden. The rain falling on her is perfectly clean, the air is totally pure, the whole vibe is completely serene, and yet, something is terribly, impossibly wrong. Vera walks into a crime scene that completely defies logic. She finds a body lying peacefully in a bed of beautiful night-blooming moonflowers. But here is the crazy part. There is not a single sign of a struggle. No trauma, no toxins in the system, not even footprints in the mud around her. The victim hasn't been harmed in any way that modern medicine can make sense of, which begs this absolutely terrifying question. How does a human being just stop? The medical paradox here is just mind-blowing. The civic response team notes that the victim's respiratory, cardiac, and neurological systems all just ceased simultaneously. I mean, think about that for a second. Human biology just does not work like that. We have all these built-in biological backup systems designed by millions of years of evolution to fail individually. For your heart, lungs, and brain to all shut off at the exact same millisecond without some massive external trigger, it's literally a biological impossibility. So, who was the victim? Her name was Maren Sollis. She was 47 years old, and her profession was a pleasure architect, specializing in creating immersive, emotional environments. She was highly respected, she lacked for absolutely nothing, and she spent all her endless free time designing these beautiful, thoughtful experiences for other people. So why on earth would someone who is clearly flourishing in a perfect utopia suddenly experience a total, spontaneous, systemic shutdown?
Well, the first big clue is in this incredibly haunting description of Maren among the moonflowers. Her expression was peaceful, but not just relaxed. It was deliberately, knowingly peaceful. And that really emphasizes that she wasn't attacked by some rogue utopian criminal. She wasn't murdered in any conventional sense. Instead, it looks like she just concluded. She reached an endpoint, accepted entirely, and her biology just followed suit.
To figure out what was missing in her otherwise flawless life, we actually need to look at one of Maren's recent art installations. She created this highly controversial exhibit called The Room of Sufficient Darkness. It was a space of complete sensory deprivation. In a utopian world with absolutely no dark rooms, where every single sense is constantly stimulated and perfectly satisfied, she went out of her way to intentionally build a void.
And we actually know exactly why she built it, thanks to a handwritten letter she sent to a researcher named Dr. Theo Asante. She wrote, "I am trying to find the weight of my own life," which is just wow. It perfectly captures this profound struggle she had trying to feel real in a world flooded with constant, effortless provision. She realized this really fundamental truth. To actually see yourself, you need contrast. Visibility requires distinction, and distinction requires absence.
Now, the crucial thing to understand here is that Maren wasn't clinically depressed. It was something different. She had reached this terrifying, crystal-clear realization that her presence in the world was just entirely unnecessary. She literally felt herself become optional. The world and the beautiful gardens would be just as perfect without her. And the truly chilling part?
She felt profoundly relieved by that thought. She totally accepted her own absolute lack of consequence. This brings us to the groundbreaking work of psychosocial researcher Dr. Theo Asante, who finally puts a name to Maren's fatal condition. He calls it the pathology of sufficiency. It's exactly what happens to a person who has absolutely everything they need but nothing they must do. Without any friction, without a fight for survival or some kind of struggle to overcome, the self just starts feeling like a very elaborate ghost floating through a totally frictionless world.
Let's unpack this a little more, because it's a terrifyingly deep philosophical concept known as existential optionality. It's that subjective experience of perceiving that your continued presence has zero essential consequence. When a highly sensitive person realizes they are completely interchangeable with their own absence, their consciousness basically begins to organize against itself. If they reach a certain extremity of stillness and clarity, the mind can just decide, completely below the level of conscious volition, to just stop existing.
I absolutely love the sociology behind this. Think about it. The human mind evolved over millions of years to push against the world, right? To survive against crazy odds. As Dr. Asante so brilliantly puts it, the self is sharpened by resistance the way a tool is sharpened by stone. Without that friction, the self dilates. It loses its anchor to reality. It goes soft, and it turns entirely inward until it just disappears.
So what's the solution to this utopian paradox? Obviously, it's not returning to poverty or inequality or all the cruel injustices of the past. The answer is something called voluntary wait. In a post-scarcity society, humans desperately need spaces where they can actively choose to face genuine, consequential difficulty. We need stakes. We need to know that if we fail at a chosen task, there is a real consequence, so that our choices actually matter again. And right when you think this is just a tragic one-off, we get to the gasp moment of the investigation. Detective Vera Vasquez pulls the city's aggregate health data, looking for identical biological anomalies, and she realizes Maren was not an isolated incident. 47. Over the last 5 years, 47 people in this city have died in this exact same, mathematically impossible, frictionless way.
You might be wondering, how did the city miss this? Well, look at how the system categorized them. NCI, natural cessation indeterminate. The utopian system had a massive blind spot that allowed this to go completely unchecked. Because the city had successfully eradicated external causes of death, like violence or starvation, it just quietly filed away these impossible deaths as minor bureaucratic anomalies. The system simply lacked the vocabulary to describe a self that just decides to conclude out of sheer sufficiency.
Looking at the data breakdown, these 47 people spanned all ages, from 23 all the way to 79. They were artists, architects, scientists. These were not outcasts at all. Actually, their friends commonly described them as being constitutionally unable to be somewhere without fully being there. They were the city's most intellectually serious, highly present citizens. And because they noticed everything so deeply, they were the ones who most desperately needed their actions to have actual consequences. But there is a way back from the edge. We see it in a man named Darian Holt. He's a survivor who was heading down the exact same path as Maren, but he saved himself by undertaking this incredibly difficult task, building an impossible, totally unpredictable acoustic instrument from scratch. By tackling genuine physical friction, he proved to himself that the world wasn't finished. Creating something truly unpredictable gave his mind a literal reason to stick around.
Which brings us to our next major section, the architecture of tomorrow, stakes architecture.
Vera takes her groundbreaking report directly to the city council, and this pivots everything from a criminal investigation into massive civilizational design. The city leaders finally realize that a perfectly smooth, painless world just isn't enough for the human psyche. So they create the Sollis rooms in Maren's honor. These are incredible civic spaces built to provide deliberate architecture. You have a dark room for vital sensory deprivation, a task room where failing to do garden maintenance actually has real negative impacts, an empty room with deliberate architectural flaws for citizens to physically figure out and fix. They finally provide the chosen friction and stakes that the citizens are starving for.
In her final investigative report, Vera writes this beautifully empowering conclusion. She says, "The utopia has a shadow. The shadow is not evidence that the light is wrong. It is evidence that the light has reached far enough to cast one." What an absolutely brilliant way to frame it, right? It emphasizes that a perfect world is never truly finished. Success just reveals the next, deeper layer of complex human need.
And this connects right back to the beginning of our narrative, bringing everything full circle. A year later, we see Darian Holt playing his completed, unpredictable instrument to an audience of 300 highly present, fully attentive citizens right there in the very same garden where Maren passed. The composition is beautifully named Sufficient Darkness. It stands as a profound testament to the friction that keeps us all alive.
Vera leaves us with a profound realization about human nature. The self, once it has everything it needs, discovers what it wants. Because true freedom from survival isn't the end of the journey, where you just sit back passively forever. It's actually the very beginning of discovering your own directional purpose, your own chosen friction, and your own weight in the universe. So I'm going to end this explainer with a lingering philosophical question for you to chew on. What is the self once it has everything it needs? Take a moment today to really examine your own life. Think about your own need for friction, for challenge, and for meaning. Because maybe the struggles and the stakes that we try so hard to eliminate are the exact things anchoring us to reality. Thanks for diving into this incredible story with me, and keep questioning.